Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're going to be looking today at the month of July. The month of July has a lot of planetary shifts and changes. We'll feel the changes and so on that will come along here. But first of all, as with everything, I say welcome to our panel. It's great to see you guys again. And let's go through and talk about our word that we've chosen first. And Susan, I'm going to go to you first. What's the word that you've chosen for the month of July?
Well, I was torn. So I had finding balance and also adjusting to change. Like I couldn't decide. There's so much going on with the changing of the nodes, and then Pluto's in there squaring the nodes. And I just found, even though, summer's the time when we want to just relax and have fun, there's a lot of planetary tension and stuff going on in behind the scenes that we have to kind of find balance with all of that. So that's me.
Have to navigate it somehow or other all the
Yeah.
way along. What about you, Tanya? What was your word for July?
All right, so don't shoot me. It's the word prickly to describe the astral climate this month. It's not the most challenging month of the year, nor is it the easiest. And I kind of think people can get a bit prickly when they have a lot going on in their internal world. And with lots of retrogrades, we're just naturally more internal anyway. And we're reviewing and thinking a lot. Plus, we have several planetary aspects that are agitating, and actually they outnumber the pleasant and easy transits this month. Now, most of these testy transits will pass quickly, but overall, they just kind of create an energy that feels kind of grouchy. And I realize that I might get a bit of flack for my assessment, but in saying that, but I do think, overall it's to our advantage to be forewarned. And the thing is, with prickly energy, there's also opportunity to make changes and take necessary steps in our lives that will, move us in the direction that makes us just feel more fulfilled and happy. And so I think, these prickly transits can be frustrating, but ultimately they're pushing us on a certain path, that we can build a better tomorrow from. And yeah, they're uncomfortable, but they also inspire us to grow. And at the end of the day, we can work with what we get this month. So it's not all bad or terrible. And plus, I really believe the second week of July will give us, the ease that we need to move through this month.
And so for me, I've chosen resilience. And I think a lot of the resilience is going to come in as we see Saturn retrograding back through some of the exact same places that it was. So let's get started, shall we? And let's put up our screen. So this takes us to July 1st. And I always, there's something about coming into a month that I really do think it gives us at least a little bit of an overview of how this month is lining itself up. And as soon as we enter the month, we notice that Saturn has gone retrograde. Now, Saturn entered into Pisces in March, and being a Saturn girl myself in my own personal natal chart, I have Saturn in Capricorn, so I have a very strong Saturn. I'm having a hard time with this Saturn in Pisces. When Saturn went into Pisces in March of this year, I'm not convinced Saturn has ever really found its footing in among there. I'm sure when it originally went in, it looked and went, what do I do here? Because Saturn's about responsibility. Pisces is very dreamy, ruled by Neptune. And so I think Saturn is trying to get its footing. Saturn retrograding, we're going to see Saturn retrograde all the way back to 0 degrees. And so opening up, Saturn is actually creating a square on that very first day with the moon. Saturn's creating the square. The moon in Sag is asking us about truthfulness. It's about laying the cards on the table. It's about being upfront. It's about being honest. It's about our spirituality. And the square with Saturn, since Saturn's been into Pisces, it's really having us look at illusions. It's having us look at reality versus fantasy. What actually is the reality? And that moon in Sag is saying, time to get to the truth of the matter. Saturn is saying, we're not thinking logic. We're not meant to be thinking logic. We're meant to be thinking with the heart. You are having the responsibility right now to go directly to the heart of the matter and not entirely the logic. That's why I say I think Saturn's having a bit of a hard time. Saturn generally rules Capricorn and Aquarius, which is very much that practicality, that feet on the ground, all of that kind of stuff. And so Saturn has asked us intensely to very much get involved entirely with the heart of everything. Sorry, I meant to come back here for 1 second. Just give me a moment here. I need to go a day at a time. And, you know, we open with Mercury right in the heart of the sun. Cazimi, we call this Cazimi when we have Mercury and the sun at the exact same degree. It's only a 2-minute arc here of difference on that first day of July. And so this again is very heartfelt. If you know any Cancerians, they're all about cooking you cookies. They're about making home be home for you, making you feel really comfortable, that motherhood, mothership, mothering, mother connection. And so that's creating a trine with this Saturn, both of them in water signs. So emotionally and feeling what that mother feel is all about. So then we actually go to the next day, which would be the 3rd of July, and that gives us a full moon in July. And it really comes into, we're about a few hours outside of that full moon. Let's go to the hours. 9. We have there is the complete full moon of the sun and the moon. We know that the moon itself has no light, but what it does is that it reflects back from the sun. And also during that time period, we're getting a little bit of a help from Jupiter. Jupiter is creating what we call a sextile directly to the sun, and it's trining the moon. And so Jupiter is saying, yes, you know, we want to step into a place where we are feeling that sense of security, the sun in Cancer, that hominess, and the moon, of course, being in Capricorn. So that practical way of actually looking at all of that coming together. It's actually an interesting day because we also are having, and Susan will talk more about the fact of how the nodal axis will be doing some changes as we make our way through July. But it being on the very last degree of the south node, the last degree of Scorpio, the north node, the last degree of Taurus, You know, we were here in this place 19 years ago. So if you actually go back 19 years ago, that will actually help you to reconnect and sort of connect with the vibration. As we come forward into the 4th, we actually do see Saturn has moved back to the 6th degree. Saturn and Jupiter will be having that conversation going back and forth. This is also considered a sextile. We like sextiles. Sextiles are good aspects. And so Saturn in Pisces is also asking us to get in touch with that intuition. Have you really been telling yourself the absolute truth over all of this? Jupiter is asking us, how do you feel internally, vibrationally? Lots of times Taurus talks about our money, our finances. And Saturn is saying, intuitively, what feels right for you? We don't have anything in air through here. Through that whole entire first part of July, there is no air planets, which of course is the Gemini, the Libra, and the Aquarius. There are nothing in those particular signs. So we will feel more because air in our chart has to do with mentality, our actual thought process. As we come along, now we have the nodal axis right at 0 degrees. And 0 degrees in a chart is very, very telling. It is believed, most of you know I'm an evolutionary astrologer. Most of you realize from evolutionary astrology books is that if you are born with anything within your chart that sits at a 0 degree, whether it's the node, whether it's the moon, whether it's the sun, whether Mars, look in your own personal chart to see if you have something at 0 degrees. It says that this is your very first lifetime experiencing that vibrational energy. Let's just say you have Mercury at 0 degrees Gemini. Evolutionary astrologer says you were never born before with Mercury at the very beginning part of Gemini. So it's going to feel a little bit foreign to you. It's going to feel like it's going to take some time to step directly into that actual vibration. As we move along to the 7th, one of the big things we're going to be watching in this July, and of course, Tanya is going to cover it, but we're going to see Venus is going to retrograde. And this happens every 2 years. Tanya will certainly talk about this without a doubt. But at the early part of July, Venus is already slowing down. Venus is already creating that slow down in life. And it's creating an inconjunct with Neptune. Water, Neptune's in water. Neptune is very, very strong in Pisces, in modern astrology. Neptune rules Pisces. And Venus likes to be in Leo, but Leo sometimes can be a bit dramatic for Venus. Inconjunct says it's kind of like sitting for a long time and having to get up and readjust your skirt, that it's become too close to you. So inconjuncts, drawing a line from Neptune down to Venus, that inconjunct says, there's got to be an adjustment here. So one of the things we want to be paying attention to, Neptune in Pisces says, like, I love to take care of. I really enjoy. The sign of Pisces is like the nurses, the doctors, the counselors, the people who look after everybody else. Venus in Leo, the inconjunct, says, are you perhaps loving too much? Are you perhaps needing to do some kind of an adjustment there? Sometimes we can overdo, and people find it hard to say to us, oh, please don't overdo. And this big adjustment is huge here on the 7th of July. And I'm going to pass it now over to Tanya. But before I do either of you want to comment on that first week in July?
No.
I'm good too.
Okay, we're good to go.
Yeah.
So we're going to have Tanya pick it up here on the 8th of July.
Yeah, this is like my favorite week in the month of July, because one type of aspect basically rules this week, and it's the sextile. In astrology, the sextile alignment is all about balance and cooperative planetary energy that, flows freely. And it usually does bring us some fortunate opportunities in our lives. It's a soft touch. It helps us, make a choice. It's an unfoldment, and it's harmonizing. And I like to think of a sextile kind of like, like a kiss from the universe. And for those, that are new to astrology, mathematically, it's an aspect of 60 degrees, give or take, up to 5 degrees orb difference. And this week, we're going to experience 6 sextile alignments, which will feel like, I think, some of the easiest days of this month. Now, on July 8th, the disseminating moon will make the most loveliest aspect in astrology called a trine to the planet Mercury, who's sitting at 24 degrees Cancer. And when the moon is disseminating or waning, we're reflecting on lessons and the peak experiences, basically, of the past few weeks. It's about sharing and communicating and assessing. And because this moon is in Pisces and Mercury is also in a water sign, sharing our feelings, I think, may become more easily. And the sun is also sitting in Cancer. So there is this strong focus, like Holly was saying, on home and family, housing, our internal worlds, and our roots this month. And water transits really bring us into our hearts. Like Holly was saying, in the Pisces moon will flow creative, dreamy vibes to these areas of home and family. And I also think it's like a great couple of days for just being creative at home, maybe making any changes or revisions to home improvements, if you've been working on any over the past few weeks, or even celebrating some family milestones. I know for me, example, my family will be coming together for a wedding shower to celebrate the upcoming wedding of my daughter, Maddie, to her fiance, Nick, during this week, which will bring both the groom and bride's families together. And both of Maddie and Nick, of course, are Cancer sun signs, and his family's from Europe, which is very Pisces, so I just love how everything is always so divinely in sync with the stars. Yeah. Anyway, I'd like to add also that these couple of days are also very opportune days, as Mercury, the planet of communication, is making a sextile to Uranus, who's known for being creative and albeit a bit unpredictable and shocking, but exciting and very future focused. And here we have both water and earth elements coming together, and they flow very easily when they connect. So I think that the opportunities that present should feel both safe and secure and heartwarming, even if there's an element of surprise. And if you notice, this moon is also going to connect directly with Neptune at 27 degrees Pisces, and then form a sextile to Pluto retrograde sitting at 29 degrees Capricorn. So, our inner world, our feelings and home and family life have this very instinctive feel, dreamy and creative quality. But at the same time, we feel sentimental and hopeful about some older paradigm in our lives that's, been undergoing deep transformation since 2008. For example, I have had it in my 8th house of trauma, money I borrow, sex, intimacy, death, and rebirth. And all of this has undergone massive transformation and resurrection for me over these past 15 years. So now everyone, including myself, we're being invited to like look back with Pluto coming back into Capricorn again. And with the moon sextile Pluto, we can reflect just how far we've come over these past 15 years. And it's been a huge journey as we've faced the darker aspects of power and privilege hidden within ourselves and humanity. And now moving on to the 10th, Mars in Virgo will sextile. Remember, that's the key aspect this week. The south node sitting at 0 degrees Scorpio and trine the north node sitting at 0 degrees Taurus. And this aspect's going to happen over several days, but it definitely becomes exact on the 10th and 11th. And the moon will also pass 0 degrees Taurus on the 10th. And on the 11th, Mercury in Cancer will, yes, sextile Mars in Virgo, sextile north node and trine south node. So that's a lot of sextiling, if you ask me. Basically, these nodes which point towards our future and look to the past are now sitting, like Holly said, at this very critical degree in astrology since moving into the signs of Taurus and Scorpio on, I think it was January 18th of last year. So we can think of 0 degrees as a degree that kind of hovers multiple worlds between the seen and the unseen. So I think any planet at 0 degrees basically represents balance between light and dark. It represents both an ending and a new beginning. And I think 0 degrees is a lot like the God experience in that it represents all that there is to feel. So 0 degrees is both a full jug of wisdom or knowledge, and at the same time, it's an entry into a brand new dimension, brand new beginning, like Holly was saying. Planets, angles, or points at 0 degrees have a real Aries quality to them. So there's like this burst of energy or a boom or a dynamic feel to them. And so that, the way we think and communicate and act and use our energy will be flowing together to create some kind of brand new opportunity in our lives. And we take all the wisdom we've gained over the past year and a half when it comes to, things like money, resources, our assets, and what we, borrow from institutions as well as how we become more self-sufficient, more secure, stable, and use it now to move into the future with brand new ideas. So I'm kind of curious, do you guys have any thoughts about this?
Well, one of the things I just noticed and hadn't really thought about it before is south nodes at 0 degrees Scorpio, as you've been talking about. The ruler of that south node, Mars, is also at 0 degrees in Virgo. And the ruler of Virgo is Mercury, which is also at 0 degrees.
Wow. Wow, that is powerful.
Yeah, a lot of beginnings. And yeah, a lot of beginnings.
I didn't see
A lot
that
of
either.
shifting, right? A lot of shifting. Well, I hadn't even noticed it until you just sort of, and I thought, Scorpio, so what rules Scorpio is Mars. What's going on with Mars? Well, Mars is at 0 degrees Virgo. What rules Virgo? Mercury, which is also at 0 degrees.
Wow, that's awesome. What about you, Susan? What do you think?
No, total agreement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So on the 11th and 12th, the sun in Cancer will square Chiron in Aries and could feel, I think a bit challenging for some people. This aspect will, spotlight an area where we feel weak or sensitive, even wounded. But I think to our surprise, we discover that we're bolder and braver than we thought. And I think during this time, we might connect with the prominent teacher or mentor or leader who, guides us from a place of empathy and experience, like the sign of Cancer, or we ourselves, might even become a role model or guide to others, that stems from working through our own pain point. Chiron in Aries is all about how to love myself and my life And the sun in Cancer wants us to nurture ourselves and to parent any inner child wounds that, might be nagging at us. And now, because the sun in Cancer is making a square aspect, I think, the energy just feels like this internal pressure, to act or make changes. And could also be an external pressure from family or involve homes or ancestry in some way. I think these few days are excellent for planning some nurturing self-care rituals. Anything, especially involving water or cooking, like Holly was saying earlier, would be helpful. Now, if we look back on April 5th, the sun and Chiron actually met together in a conjunction at 15 degrees Aries. So in our April recording, I talked about how the sun was shining its light on our wounds, and although painful, it was guiding us to where we need to be. And I think these Chiron wounds are usually, they're deep and often lifelong pain points that, can actually become something really beautiful as we age and we mature. And the sun meeting in Chiron in April was the planting of new seeds for the ways we will courageously heal this year. And now, because the sun is making its first quarter square, we're forced, we're motivated and inspired to start taking some action. So it might feel uncomfortable, but I think, what hurts doesn't hold us back. It increases our empathy and defines our purpose. And, it's fueling our drive to move forward. We're stronger and softer because of it. I mean, after all, the sun in Cancer is all about inner strength and nurturing. And in April, we also talked about Chiron in Aries representing wounded leaders, the big boom in cosmetic procedures and wounds to our self-identity, our egos, or even our heads. So I think we could actually see some news headlines related to these kinds of themes. And I think it's really interesting to note that former US President Donald Trump actually pleaded not guilty to 34 felony charges on April 5th when the sun and Chiron were conjunct in Aries. Of course, we recorded before the time. So, I think that ended up being a good prediction. And he was charged with illegally covering up hush money payments made to porn actress Stormy Daniels to prevent a sex scandal that could have hurt his 2016 presidential campaign. I mean, talk about a great example of sun conjunct Chiron Aries. And not great for him, but just in terms of being an example for astrology. And, Donald Trump is the first US president to ever be criminally charged. He was also the first president to be impeached twice. So, you think about that humbling factor, he was fingerprinted, but, he was spared being handcuffed and a mug shot, which would have been further publicly humiliating before he made that historically monumental court appearance that day. And, his ascendant ruler is the sun. So I think this possibly may have helped him. Of course, he's since been charged with classified documents, felony charges. So if we think of the conjunction of the sun to Chiron as the seed planting, then as the sun starts to move around the zodiac, I think, we're literally going to watch these seeds grow before our eyes. And we're going to see more evolution of this whole Trump story. And no doubt in my mind that July will, bring his story to a major crisis point, because squares are associated with crisis. And with sun in Cancer, the sign that rules over home and family, I mean, is it any wonder that these documents were found in his home? And I wonder, could family members be charged next as well? I'm not really sure. What do you guys think?
Well, in mundane astrology, which is the astrology of world affairs and governments and so on, Cancer rules homeland, like homeland security. So I'd be willing to bet, because, and I hadn't even thought about this, Trump with the initial running into problems there with the conjunction when the sun had been lined up here. And now we've got our first square. It'll be interesting on July 12th as to whether that square will actually be what they decide, do the final decision process on exactly how they are going to handle this.
This was also the Pluto return for the US
That's right.
as
It is
well.
the
And so when
yeah.
the sun gets down a little bit further, it's going to be in an opposition to Pluto, which, you know, that's shining light on, I think, just more corruption and stuff that's been going on. So, you know, it'll be interesting to see. So,
And then
you know,
it'll have its third square, and then it'll come back around again.
yeah.
And
So,
conjunct-
yeah, no.
can conjunct again. So yeah, it's gonna just play out right before our eyes, I think.
And, you know, when the sun gets in the opposition, which we'll see roughly in like late October, no,
Mhm.
late September would be when it would be in the Libra. That will then be the opposition. So watching the four corners, this is the first square.
Mhm.
And then the opposition will be when the sun gets into Libra. And then the last square will be when the sun gets into Capricorn. All things begin as a storyline, and you can follow it when you look at astrology. You can follow it exactly on a storyline. It's the same way with a marriage. You can do a marriage and look at the planetary alignment. That will automatically, like the wedding, when you say I do, that's the birth chart then of that actual wedding. And you can follow that through just like you can a chart such as this. Anyway, sorry. We
Oh, so good. It's so interesting, right? Like it's just so fascinating. So just to wrap up this transit, I'll just say that, you know, whatever was bothering us back in April was bothering us, I think, for a reason. And this is all playing out in our own lives. So whatever was uncomfortable then is now revealing itself and asking us to, you know, to take some concrete actions and steps forward towards, you know, something even better for ourselves. And yeah, it might feel like a crisis or a pressure. So I encourage, you know, you to listen closely to whatever your soul is trying to tell you, and, you know, take the steps that you need. Now, finally, on July 14th, the sun will move to 22 degrees Cancer and make, guess what? A friendly sextile aspect to Uranus at 22 degrees Taurus. And, you know, the sun represents our life purpose, and Uranus represents the inner desire to be different and exceptional, non-conforming, rebellious, non-conventional, rational, and creative. And so, you know, we have the sun and Uranus meeting like this. It inspires us to have the courage to do things others can't do or don't want to do. And with Cancer and Taurus being the areas of life we see this playing out, it's about, again, about home, family, security, money, love, you know, the things we value. And also because Uranus is involved, you know, again, we've said it before, there could be an element of surprise or a sudden shift. And if you've been working on a goal, for example, that seems impossible, I think now will be the time that you'll conceive some great idea that inspires you to achieve it. And this aspect wants us to live life on our own terms with the resources and possessions, valuables, and money we earn. And we want freedom and space when it comes to home and family. And now we actually have the opportunity, you know, to make that happen. Our comfort is more unconventional and eccentric, you know, but we're okay with it around this time. You know, we feel pushed to improve our lives, but it's, you know, it's not coming from an external pressure like the square. It just feels easy to initiate any change, and, you know, we're not afraid of upsetting others. I think, you know, I think our intuition will be strong this week. We adapt easily. We're making choices that align with our inner authority. And this week we don't compromise that inner authority, but we also flow. And we have courage and lots of opportunity. And so, yeah, I just love this week. And I'll pass it on to Susan. But before I do, I hope you guys will leave any comments or questions that you have for me about this week. And also, if you could help Holly build her channel by subscribing to her page, that would be great. And that way you won't miss any of her content. And that's it for me.
Thank you very much, Tanya. Real busy week. We've only just barely touched the first 2 weeks of July. So it's busy as we go along, and we're going to pass it on over to Susan now.
Yeah, it is busy as we go along. So I'm starting from Sunday on the 16th, and we have, let me see, we have Mercury, our planet of communication. He's coming into a square with Jupiter. It's an approaching square. And Jupiter in Taurus is expansive and optimistic, but he also puts a focus on our financial situations. And so the conversation that's going on between him and Mercury is focused on the financial situations and decisions. And it might be conversations that we're having or that we maybe not want to have about how we're spending or overspending as we plan our summer vacations and trips. And Mercury in Leo also. Leo likes grand gestures. So, Mercury's there in Leo, and he could become a bit braggy about what he's doing, how he's spending his money. Maybe, you're bragging about your new pool or where you're going for a wonderful weekend at a high-end resort. And so whatever, Jupiter might be urging us to be maybe a little more subtle or a little more diplomatic in our social conversations around others. So I'll move on to Monday. So the 17th, we have the new moon in Cancer. So both of you talked a lot about Cancer. It's our sign of home and family. And so with the new moon, it's also shining a light on all our summer family traditions. Summer is usually the time when people get together for the vacations and things like that. So it's a focus on that. And Cancer is also a cardinal sign, which means that it likes to initiate. So it's a good time maybe to start new ventures or goals that maybe enhance our sense of security or improvements in our home lives. New moons always bring in an energy that encourages change in our lives and new beginnings. So with this new moon, we can welcome in maybe anything that helps our family and our domestic affairs and adds to our feeling of safety and security. Also on the 17th is when we have the nodes changing signs, I believe, sometime later in the day. After a year and a half in the fixed signs of Taurus and Scorpio, the nodes are now going to move into Aries and Libra, which is known as the me-we axis. So our focus will be more on ourselves and our self-development and learning to balance that self-focus that we have with the Libra end of it means including other people in our lives. We can't have all the focus just being on ourselves all the time. We have to learn to maybe acknowledge our self-worth. And that was when we were in Taurus. It was about acknowledging our self-worth and what we valued. And with the South Node in Scorpio, it was about shared resources and also recognizing what we didn't need to carry with us any longer. So Taurus brought us in that physicality of the earth energy, and Scorpio, the emotionality of the water energy. So now with the North Node moving into Aries and the South Node into Libra, we're bringing in a fire and an air energy, which is it's totally different than the water and the earth. So Aries is action, and it wants us to move forward. And because Aries is a sign that is very much about the self, it wants us to move forward with self-growth and self-awareness and self-development. But so it's all about sort of our individuality and our identity and who we are. But then on the other end of it, you have Libra in the South Node, which puts more of a focus on the importance of close relationships with others, and both in business and personal. And, South Node is often, it's associated with loss, but it's also associated with the things that we're more comfortable with, things that we've maybe comfortable with from another life. So, maybe we're more comfortable being in close relationships than we are being on our own. So it's like finding that balance of our own self-identity, and then also being able to have relationships with other people. So yeah, because we need other people to in our lives to make life worthwhile living, I think. So the beginning of the nodes in Aries and Libra also sets up that square with Pluto, who is retrograde in Capricorn. So Pluto's at the midpoint of the nodes, which is called in the bendings. So when the planets are in the bendings of the nodes, it can create this feeling of being in a place of transition. And with Pluto in Capricorn, it brings our attention back to what was happening during the previous years that Pluto was in Capricorn. And that was, a lot to do with corporate and political corruption. There was abuse of power and wealth, as we talked about Trump, so we know there was abuse of power and wealth, and strong and powerful leaders falling from grace. So this Pluto being in the bendings, it can have a big effect, a societal effect, and also maybe economic or political effect on a world level. Pluto squaring the nodes could also bring in a lot of healing to generational wounds as he exposes them, and then sort of works to create a world space that is healthier for us. So there's a lot of personal wounds that have been inflicted on individual people in power by people on individuals by people in power. And Pluto's retrograde back into Capricorn is going to bring more of that, I think, up to the surface. It's through Pluto kind of bringing corruption into light that allows us to move forward towards transforming into something that's for the greater good. So the squares, we know they bring in tension, and tension leads us to make decisions. So with the nodes now in Aries and Libra, allows us to decide how we want to proceed with our self-growth and our development, and what we want to leave behind, all the while trying to find that sense of balance that we need with other people involved in our lives. For individuals, this whole group of there are whole groups of people that will be affected more than others by this. So the sensitive degrees from 27 degrees of the cardinal signs of Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, as well as up to the first 3 degrees of the fixed signs of Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius will, feel this a lot. So that was my little thing on the nodes. And I was just wondering if you guys had any comments you wanted to make about the change of the nodes going into Libra and Aries.
So I guess the first thing I noticed is within a few hours of this, we're going to experience a grand cross, because that moon will come within a few hours to 29 degrees Cancer, which then creates an opposition to Pluto, and it creates the nodal.
The nodes, yeah.
So that's really within a few hours of that new moon. So yes. Are we all going to feel at crossroads? Absolutely. Doesn't matter what sign you are. We're all going to, because it's going to happen up here in the sky. Crossroads, like this is called a grand cross. And so grand crosses are when we feel we're at a crossroads in life. Do we go here? Do we go here? Do we go here? Do we go here? And I guess from my perspective, one of the best ways that I find to work my way through that is to ask, what brings me closest to my authentic self? I think that's one of the ways to work through the Grand Cross. Tanya, do you want to say anything, or no?
Well, I just wanted to say too, again, when we look at that 29 degrees, especially 29 degrees Aries, where the North Node is moving into, I think we could see themes coming back around again from April and May. We talked about when Jupiter was there at the 29 degrees, we had full moon. Was the eclipse? Can't remember. It was full moon.
We
eclipse.
had the solar eclipse on
Solar
in
eclipse.
the 20th of April at 29 degrees Aries.
29 degrees Aries as well. I mean, there's stories that were developing, in April and May, getting us ready really for what's to come. And I think, again, with the Grand Cross, we're talking about, tension and motivation and inspiration to change, but it doesn't always feel really good when it happens, but in the end, whether it's on an individual level or on a societal level, it's moving us towards greater things, especially when we're talking about the North Node. But we're bringing all of that we've learned, from our South Node experiences with us forward too. So, yeah.
Yeah. And the groundedness from, when the North Node was in Taurus, it sort of got us a bit grounded in our own personal finances and all of that stuff. And now it's like, okay, you've done all this grounding, you've done all this planning. And now when it goes into Aries, it's like, okay, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to move forward with it, or are you going to go backwards? So yeah, we have the choice. I mean, some people prefer, you're looking at the sun and the moon there in Cancer and then opposing in Virgo. Those are both planets that are very steeped in tradition. And do you want to stay back there in the dark ages, or do you want to move forward into becoming more enlightened? And so that's I find that whole thing. So I'll continue on, because then the moon is traveling through. The moon goes into Leo on Tuesday and Wednesday, and it's traveling through Leo, and it's meeting up with Mercury and Venus. So both Mercury and Venus, they're in Leo. There's all this other heavy stuff going on, but that's like, this is summer. We want to have fun. We want to be out there socializing and having fun. And so the moon kind of adds a little bit of emotion to that. And maybe it's creating some drama along the way, but, at least it's try to put the focus back on a little bit of Leo action. But then we also have the Mars in Virgo is in an approaching opposition to Saturn in Pisces. So, I think that was my Mars. I can't find my Mars. He's at
5 degrees.
5 degrees, yeah.
On the 18th.
And the Saturn's at 6 degrees. So this will be exact on Thursday, and this energy will kind of be with us for most of the week. So Mars in Virgo he's driven, and he's assertive in kind of a more analytical way, more attention to detail, which has a lot to do with our work habits and our health. And so we have to be careful of not becoming overcritical of ourselves and of other people. And then you're looking at the opposition to Saturn. Saturn in Pisces is not grounded in the physical at all. It's all to do with our compassion and our empathy, and as you have both stated, with our heart, and growing from the heart and growing spiritually. So this opposition is kind of pulling us in two directions. It's like, how do we remain focused on the details of daily life while we're trying to become more spiritually involved and empathetic towards others? And so that's kind of an interesting little energy while all this other stuff is going on. So then on Thursday, the 20th, we have the moon moving into Virgo and meeting up with Mars. So that kind of gives a little bit of emotional background to Mars in his square to Saturn. It's kind of, he maybe can look at it with a little bit of more emotionality that he would normally have when in Virgo. So he might be able to get a little bit of understanding about what's going on with Saturn and Pisces. We also have a few trine aspects happening at this time. We have Venus is finishing off her time in Leo before she retrogrades all the way back through Leo. So her trine is with the North Node in Aries. And so this is a supportive energy, and it puts an emphasis, I think, on our self-love and our self-value. And it creates maybe more of an ease for us in our social abilities as we have more confidence in ourselves. The sun in Cancer is in a trine aspect with Neptune in Pisces, which those are both water elements. So this aspect will increase our sensitivity to our environment, and maybe we'll have more empathy towards others, and make us feel more morally responsible in our actions, with an emphasis on our home and our family. It's also a great time for artistic creative talents could be highlighted at this time. And it might be, you might want to go out and take dance lessons or creative writing, or join a local theater group, or something that gets your creative juices flowing a little bit. As we move ahead to Sunday, the 23rd, we have the sun moving into its home sign of Leo, which brings us all into that lion-like presence and optimism. I mean, the sun rules Leo, so we can really shine when the sun gets into Leo, and we can live and breathe the beauty of summer that makes us all feel kind of attractive and loved. And Leos love to be loved. They love to be loved and admired, and they're very creative and colorful, and some of that we can pick up that energy while the sun is in Leo. And so wherever it is in your chart, you can feel that activation of the Leo energy. And we can also wish a happy birthday to all of our Leo friends. So as the sun moves into Leo today, we also have Venus starting her retrograde cycle back through Leo, that she has just spent 6 weeks traveling through. So we may spend our time reminiscing and reliving some of the fun that we had while the sun was in Cancer for the first month of summer, and our time that was spent with our families during that first month. So perhaps there's some early summer love connections that we made that we might enjoy revisiting during this time. Leo puts us right in the middle month of summer, so there's plenty of time for love to bloom, with Venus spending an extra long time there. And so on this loving note, I'm going to hand it over to Holly.
Well, the interesting thing is every 2 years, we go through a Venus retrograde. And as we are filming this, which is middle part of June, Venus presently is an evening star. And so what we're going to see is that Venus is here, the sun is here, the sun's going to move forward, Venus is going to move backwards, and we're going to see Venus and the sun change places, and Venus is going to become a morning star. And that makes a big difference in just life on the earth plane. As we said, that happens every 2 years. We find that Venus and the sun will change. Venus will go from an evening star to a morning star for a couple of years. Then she'll go to an evening star for a couple of years. And so it's always interesting to actually even know from your own personal natal chart, was Venus an evening star, or was Venus a morning star at the time of your birth? So that's an interesting take as well.
Also, Venus is going to square Uranus 3 times. Well. So, we talk about Venus and Leo kind of being like the summer of love, but I also think that it can also be, a month, or, where marriages are really tested, or a time when marriages are really tested. So,
and I think Venus retrograde for all of us, it's always interesting to look in your own personal chart. You want to look on the outside rim there in your own personal chart to see what house on the outside rim your Leo is in, because that's where you're going to experience this Leo retrograde. This Venus retrograde. And Venus retrograde, as we know with a retrograde, to the naked eye, it is appearing like it's going backwards. And it's time for us to do things, relook, rethink, research, recheck, recreate, re-ask. So who gives us pleasure? Review that. Who do we like to be around? Review that. Who, when we go to coffee that we walk away, we feel like a wet dish rag. Think about that. Who, when we go to coffee, we leave and we're invigorated and enjoying and wishing that there was just so much more time with this individual. So what we love, who we love, why we love, like why we love this person and why perhaps not so much this individual. where is this sense of inner love? And also in Leo is very creative. If you know any Leos yourself, Leos see color very different than the rest of us. Leos can look out a window and tell you there's 15 shades of green out there, and most of us can look out and go, it's green. So looking at that creative measure as well, what do you love creatively? What parts of it do you love that is a creative flavor? So as we move our way along, and this is an interesting alignment when the moon, the transiting moon, actually comes. So later in the evening of the 24th and 25th, that transiting moon is going to connect with that south node. Susan talked about that sometimes we think the south node connects us to a feeling of loss. I'm not a big south node person. I have to say, from working with clients, sometimes that feeling of loss doesn't even have to be of this particular lifetime. I've talked about it before. The soul doesn't die. So the soul quite often thinks it's still in the same lifetime. And sometimes if we've experienced loss at the age we're at right now, the soul goes, oh, at 35, you went through a massive loss. And so sometimes when the moon does cross and connect with the south node, there is an internal feeling of grief that can come up with no logic to it at all.
I agree. I you get that sometimes and you think, where is this coming from? And that's a wonderful explanation. Thank you very much, Holly, for that.
I got up this morning and I just felt like I could massively go into tears. I'm like, where is this coming from? I have no reason for that. And when I looked, the transiting moon was sitting on my personal south node in my chart. And I go, I'm experiencing grief from another lifetime somehow.
And then if you look at the ruler of the south node being Venus, who's sextiling it, again, we might be feeling it around the love,
A loss of love.
Or love could feel like it was a pastime love, or
That's right.
I think of anxious and avoidant attachment styles, and we're holding on to something. Sometimes we're holding on, and it's about past life connections that we're holding on to.
And how we knew that individual from that lifetime. They're not anywhere close to it in this lifetime.
Yeah.
But it's the internal, maybe we were massively enthralled with this individual from another lifetime. In this particular lifetime, we kind of look and go, but there's something there without any logic to it. And I think, and especially since the ruler, as you mentioned, of Libra is Venus, and Venus is retrograding, we will be trying to make logical sense of it and going, I don't get it. Like, I just don't get it. Well, now we understand where the getting it comes from.
And the Venus is also would be sextiling the south node.
That's right. Exactly. Yep. And in conjuncting that Pluto, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then as we come to like the 27th, now we have a fair number of planets at the ending part of a sign. And I find sometimes planets become very strong when they first go into a sign, then they sort of get their groove, they get their massive groove through there. And now we're getting ready to change into the next sign. We've got Venus retrograding, but Venus and Mercury are having a conversation. So that retrograding Venus with Mercury is our power of our communication. And so maybe we may be saying, well, we once talked about the fact that maybe we were in love, but maybe, you're kind of going your way, I'm kind of going my way. And maybe this is some of the best ways to work for us. Or in a marriage, we want to stay together. What are some ways we need to work our way through it? We do know that Leo and Libra are in sextile. We like sextiles. Sextiles are good. So there are ways of working our way through it. Just to be sure, you use your personal Mercury to be able to talk about it. Do not assume that your partner can read your mind. We do that so often. Oh, well, he knows what I'm thinking, or she knows what I'm thinking. No, let's be very loving, very kind in our delivery, but let's not assume that the person knows what we are thinking. The 28th, the 29th, we've still got the moon is going to, earlier in the day on the 29th, the moon will create a square to Saturn. When we come back a little earlier, when the moon will create a square to Saturn, and that square will be just like we were talking about before. What is the truth of the matter? What actually is the truth of the matter? Mercury has now just slipped into Virgo. Virgo has some great qualities. The attention to detail, the hard worker, but as with everything, it can be very criticizing. So be very careful, because that's also going to create a square with this moon about what is the truth. Be very sure you know what that answer is. 29th, 30th, we've got Saturn is still going to remain, of course, but now Mercury is going to come to create an opposition. And Saturn is about that being really responsible towards our intuitive self, being really responsible to our heart and listening to that heart. There will be somebody within your life that will challenge you on that. Trust that with Mercury opposing Saturn. So it's an interesting, we finish the month with the moon in Capricorn. And you're going to find yourself on that very last day of July going, yep, I've made the decision. This has changed, maybe a good change, may not be a good change, but we've worked our way through it. And that takes us through that month of July. So it is a month of testing. It is a month of resilience. It is the month of prickliness, as Tanya talked about. What were your words again, Susan?
Finding balance.
Finding balance. That's
Yeah.
right. Very much so. And of course, a lot of that we will be looking forward to with those nodes going to stay directly in Aries and Libra for the next 1.5 to 2 years. We've still got a long time to go through that. Any last final words, Susan?
I would just like to say I am so happy to have that South Node move out of Scorpio, because my natal moon was in Scorpio and I had, should I say, a hell of a time when that South Node traveled over my natal moon. So I am happy. I am so happy to see it go into Aries and Libra, which to me is just, we can deal with that a lot easier, just on, on our own personal growth level, and then as well as finding that balance with other people in our lives. And I just think it's much easier to work with.
Says the lady with the moon in Scorpio. Let's ask somebody with their moon in Libra what they're feeling about all of this.
For the Capricorn right now.
Yes, there you go.
Pluto coming back in there.
Any final words for you, Tanya?
Well, I think, one thing that Saturn retrograde can help us with all of this is that it's having some grace and compassion. I think it's a really important time for us to be learning those things and practicing those things. There's so much change happening. I mean, there's a lot of letting go of the old, and there's all this seeding, all of this brand newness coming into our lives. And yeah, it can feel prickly, like I said, but, you know, again, you know, out of that, we can give birth to something that is, you know, leaves us feeling happier and more fulfilled in our lives and overall for the whole world, you know. And I would like to wish everybody a really happy summer. I am very busy with my daughter's upcoming wedding, so I'll be taking a little bit of a break over the next 1 or 2 recordings of this of the monthly planetary panel, and I would just look forward to seeing everybody again in the fall. And I just really love doing this with you, both of you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you to everyone for being along with us. Don't forget to subscribe. See the button down underneath here so that you can connect to us. And also be sure to leave us comments. One of us along the way will always come back intermittently to read those comments. If you have some personal questions, we're always happy to do so. Have a wonderful July. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.